Hello, I'm Doug Frost. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my notions about Chile and Chilean wines. And to do so, I'd like to torture you with some PowerPoint, if I may. Obviously, there's Chile in South America. We're talking about over 2,600 miles of coastline here. And the real factor that I think I need to help people understand is the isolation of this particular country. You've got the Atacama Desert to the north, driest place on earth, in which rainfall is measured in hundredths of an inch per century. Seriously, it's really, really dry. Antarctica, obviously to the south, the vast Pacific Ocean to the west, and the highest, second highest mountain range in the world, the Andes, to the east. Now, in understanding this place, I think the fact that it's next to Argentina means that a lot of people always make this comparison to Argentina, but they have two very different histories when it comes to wine, and they have two very different attitudes, frankly, when it comes to wine. The Argentines, I think it's their Italian heritage, which is a strong influence in the culture there that helps them to view wine as this kind of daily beverage, where as for the Chileans, wine is a bit more special. Okay, it's they've been taught what they know about wine to a great degree, not by the Spanish heritage that they share with Argentina, but by the French. Now, as I mentioned, you have the very warm and very dry desert in the north, the Atacama, and what you're looking at here in this picture, the official regions, the Atacama in the north. There are some wine regions up there, not much happening, but some. Coquimbo, Aconcagua, Valle Central, the South, Sur, and Austral. In each case, each of these is going to be impacted more or less by these factors that we've talked about, by the dryness and heat in the north, by the cold in the south, by the air drainage and or the water that's available from Andes and snowpack melt, and the diurnal shift that exists, whether you're dealing with El Nino or El Nina. So it really depends upon where you are in this. Now, as this slide explains here, Spanish law restricted the growth of wine in general throughout the Western Hemisphere. And so each country has its own particular version of that. But what I think is really, really important is that in the mid-19th century, the Atacama Desert was discovered to have amazing riches. We're certainly talking about gold and silver and copper and many other minerals. And the fact that Chile was, one, an isolated country, two, the Mapuche and the Quechua and the other peoples, native peoples of Chile, were very difficult to subjugate. And it really isn't until practically the beginning of the 20th century that they are finally subjugated once and for all. To this day, there is no law in the Chilean constitution that protects or even recognizes the native peoples of Chile. So there has been an antagonistic relationship, and a lot of it is based upon the fact that they were really difficult people to battle. And so the population tended to be concentrated in and around Santiago for safety's sake, frankly. But that tended to create a small, very powerful political elite that controlled what happened. Not surprisingly, when the money shows up via the Atacama Desert, those are the people that take control of it. Those people then, by the mid-19th century, are quite wealthy and are sending their children to what is the center of the cultural universe at that time, Paris, for education. They come back fired up with the ideas of that day. And one of those ideas is that a rich nobleman has a beautiful home with botanical gardens and a vineyard, especially filled with French varieties. So that becomes part of their legacy. Chile, without question, by the mid-20th century, discovers that it can grow amazing amounts of fruits and vegetables to sell in North America during the winter time. That certainly becomes part of the greatest income that the country enjoys. And foreign investment eventually figures out that if that's true of fruits and vegetables, why not of wine? Let's go there. People start really taking a look at that. But I have to say that it's my opinion that the French investment, while it yielded some wonderful things, was maybe one of the problems, okay? Because the French who came there tried to do everything the way they did in France, and it's a radically different climate and a radically different place. We'll return to that. As you can see on this slide, Merlot's true identity was discovered in 1994. Carmenere actually was a great deal of what had believed to have been Merlot. The same was happening about the same time with Sauvignon Blanc. Turned out it was Sauvignon As or Sauvignon Vert, and all that's being sorted out. What we're seeing is a long-term growth of value wines. And I think that's also one of the problems with Chilean wine making inroads into the North American market, as it should, because most of us associate Chilean wine with good value, okay? So this is to underscore what I said before. On the west, the vast Pacific Ocean. Up north, the incredibly dry Atacama. To the east, the Andes, and to the south, Antarctica. It is the vineyards in southern Chile, in the Austral region. There is one vineyard that is the closest most vineyard to Antarctica, the southernmost vineyard in the world. So what you're looking at here is kind of a rough map that explains many of the best known wine regions in Chile. But we're gonna try to look at it with a slightly more granular way of thinking about things. Now, you've seen this slide before. This is these are the regions, I should say, that we talk about these days. And Austral is actually even new-ish for most of us. When I was coming up in this, nobody even talked about Sur and Biobío and that sort of thing. And now we are getting excited by places in Austral, like Los Lagos, where I had delicious Riesling in my last visit to Chile. But instead of going north to south, which is how we've always talked about it until the last 10 years or so, what we talk about now instead is the costa, or the coastal area. We talk about, obviously, the Andes, the vineyards that are up in the Andes foothills, and then the entre cordilleras, between those two areas is where a lot of people focus now their efforts and their thoughts. But each one is an important part and an important thread to our understanding of Chilean wine. So we're going to talk about how close to the Andes you are, or how close to the coast you are, and each will have its own assets, each will carry its own challenges as well. One of the factors that you will hear, and really for a lot of people, features of Chilean wine, is that phylloxera is not a factor here. That's true in the main. I'm sure it will not be true much longer because the world is like that. But phylloxera has not been an issue up to now, other than a few isolated pockets of problems here. That means that most of these vineyards are own-rooted. Is there an advantage to being on your own roots? I don't know. I mean, truthfully, I don't know. I'm involved in a winery project in Walla Walla, and we have two vineyards. One is own-rooted, one is not. Do I think that one is better than the other because of that? No, but I think they act differently, and so you have to factor that in. But I also think that there's fewer factors to factor in when you're own-rooted, because you don't have to account for how the rootstock is going to try to express itself, as well as the scion, the stuff you grafted onto it. Now, I'm going to use some slides that I got from Montes, simply because I think they're good examples and they're pretty pictures, and I like to talk about those wines. Here we're going to take a look at Apalta, the estate itself in Colchagua. This is the Finca de Apalta. We're not too far away from the estate itself, where the fantastic Francis Malman restaurant is. Highly recommended when you go. Not if, when you go. Must eat there, please do. But you can see now that one of the characteristics of vineyards here in Chile that we're going to talk about a lot, and when you go there that people will talk about, they'll say, well, This is Andean, however, this also is colluvial, or this is entre cordilleras, but it's also alluvial. That's to say there's some river stone, or it's a mix of colluvial and alluvial. Now, colluvial basically means that as we get erosion down from the mountain, it pulls rocks down from the mountains. Alluvial, of course, I think most of you know, is river stones. It's river rocks. The river moved this stuff and deposited that stuff. Those are different materials. They tend to act differently. They tend to clump differently and aggregate differently. Why is that important? Am I saying that the rock gives the flavor to the wine? I mean, there's plenty of people who think that's true, and I think there's some examples of that being true. But in general, the more important factor is the texture of the soil, the water holding capacity of the soil, and that's influenced by these characteristics, whether it's colluvial, alluvial, mountainous, etc. Here's another nice look at this, and I think that the reason I show you this picture is now you can get a sense of how alluvial aggregate might be different than colluvial. The stuff coming down from the mountains is going to be, of course, different. The big rocks are the ones that get stuck early on. The smaller pebbles and stones will flow farther out. Alluvial materials are going to generally less likely be bigger stones, bigger materials like that. And there you can see the picture that we were looking at previously, okay? And where the river is. Now, I also wanted to show you this particular Colchagua estate. Again, I'm just utilizing Montez's slides because they're so pretty. Colchagua, now we are, very much in a valley situation. And this is a valley that has done great work with Cabernet Sauvignon over the years and other Bordeaux varieties, unquestionably. However, we are seeing increasingly a focus upon Carmenere, and really, really nice Carmenere happening from there, from Apalta, from Maipo as well. Let's find ourselves in the Maipo here, and one of the most famous estates in all of Chile, Almaviva, with Michel Frieux. Frieux is, I just think, a genius of a winemaker. I love these wines. I will state that in the early going, my concern at the 20 years ago when they were getting started, my concern was, will these wines be genuinely Chilean? And for some people that would be a controversial statement. By this I mean, there is a characteristic of Chile that is distinct to itself, and wannabe French wine or wine from any other place is not, I think, a worthy ambition. And Almaviva was, for me, in the initial going, I was quite worried, oh, it's going to be another one of those. And there are estates that I think were more guilty of that than others. I think Senya in the early going was not very Chilean. Almaviva quickly became, I think, recognizably Chilean and still very elegant, a lovely, internationally successful wine, without question, in my view. The soils that we see throughout Chile are going to vary, of course, because we're talking about a vast scale here. But I do like to show this picture to give you, once again, this sense of colluvial soils, in this case, how they mix together, how large stones and small stones mix together, how distinct these soils can be, even though at the topsoil it all kind of looks the same. The article that I have created talks a lot about this, but it is this 19th century money, these vast riches that show up again and again, particularly when you're in the Maipo. Here we are at Santa Rita, and I can seem to be criticizing that oligarchy. Certainly in my article, I have not particularly kind words for the impact of all this, certainly to the present day. But when you get there, it is pretty. It is really bucolic and really quite calming to walk around. This fountain, I would just say, if you see swans in the fountain, if you see, this is true of Conchuatoro as well, if you see the swans, do not approach them. Why are swans so pissed off all the time? What is that about swans? They're pretty. Act like it. God, they're angry, angry, vicious creatures. They really are. I'm not joking. I spent some time my last visit in Leda. It was great to get there because I'd been drinking these wines obviously for a long time. And I remember even 20 years ago discovering wines of San Antonio and saying, wait, what? What's going on here? And it's coastal. We have gone to the Costa, and there you can see it. There's a pretty good picture of it all. Here we are talking to Viviana Navarrete, and that overlook that you see that she appears to be staring at, she's not. I put the two pictures together, but that overlook, if you go down to that copse of trees that you can see there, is where we had some lunch, and I froze my cojones off because it's summer at this point. It was a December trip on this particular trip. It was summer there, and yet wearing the wrong clothes because it was flippin' cold. But this is the coastal thing. If you look at the mountains and the trees in the distance, just beyond that is the ocean, and it was bloody cold. Now, the major regions that I've at this point referenced, I wanted to put them on a slide so that you can have a little bit more of an understanding of what I'm talking about here. This grouping is not north to south. Valle Central is the area that we talk about a lot because it's very, very important. And a lot of the classic wines that we focus upon from Chile and have up to now are from here. I'm not making any claims about Atacama, but Coquimbo with Elqui and Limari, I've had some really exciting white wines, cool climate varieties from these places. I'm still sorting my views out about Pinot Noir here. Aconcagua, certainly Casablanca is an incredibly famous vineyard area because it was if you will, it was the first coastal region to get international attention. And that international attention was enough to draw Chilean attention to it as well. And not long afterwards, we follow up with San Antonio and Leda and Elqui and et cetera. Going down south, Itata and Biobío are areas that were discovering what is appropriate there. And so they're a work in progress, but they're very exciting things there and in other parts in the south. And as I said earlier, Astral also, there's some really exciting things beginning to happen there. The grape variety breakdown, as you can see, Cabernet Sauvignon is still king here. Pais or Criolla is a grape that for a lot of people, if they could just wipe it away, they'd be happy. And it is only in the last 5 years, I would say, that people have begun to say, wait a minute, there's something really interesting here. Why don't we try to make good wines from these grapes? And I'm a supporter. I won't make any claims that it makes great wine, nothing of the sort, but it makes intriguing wine and fun wine. And I encourage people to check one out. Syrah and Merlot and Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, these French varieties are doing better and better because they're finally getting to the appropriate place. The last 20 years, maybe more even the last 10 years have seen a rationalization where grapes are getting where they belong. And Carmenere, the last 10 years has seen a shift away from, oh my God, it's so herbaceous, just let it hang out there forever. And it made, I think, an imbalanced wine to, hey, this is what it is. Let's just, pick it when it's appropriately ripe, deal with the herbaceousness by not trying to over extract. And Carmenere is better today than it's ever been, unquestionably. And then finally, at the bottom of the list there, you see Moscatel de Alejandra. This is a grape that also goes back to the beginnings, the Spanish origins of viticulture in Chile. And much like Pais, there's a rethinking and a reconsideration of what the grape can do and how best to use it. Back to Carmenere for just 1 second. It's to say it is an unusual grape. It was much more important in the 19th century in Bordeaux. It did not take to grafting well at all. So it shows up in Chile, where it is typically ungrafted. And it is a wine that we're still sorting out the best way to make it. But I think that what we see here is the ideal outcome of good Carmenere. Okay? the Chilean wine laws are such that you can blend varieties together and you can blend vintages together. It may not seem like a big thing, but blending a little bit of fresher wine in a wine that has been in barrel for a year or two can have surprisingly advantageous effects. So as a person who has participated in blending trials a number of times over the years, I think like a 1% or a 2% addition of younger wine to a wine that's been in barrel for a long time can be really intriguing and really brighten a wine up and do a lot of things for it. So I'm not critical of this. On the other hand, I will say, really, 25%? Is that necessary? These are all works in progress. So as we've talked about from the outset, we've looked at some of the famous areas of Chile and wanted to give you a sense of the diversity here, not just north to south, but east to west, as I say, and give you some sense of where some of these new areas like San Antonio are showing up. And Leda, I just hope that you'll seek those out with the appropriate grapes, being typically Pinot Noir, Syrah, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, even some Albarino. People are playing with a lot of grapes here. And it is the Casablanca Valley that really got people thinking about it. It's not a monolith. As you go to the east, you get up into the foothills, it is warmer, and things like Syrah and Merlot and can start to do some really interesting things there. Other grapes are yet to follow. So I wanted to give you this opportunity to supplement, I guess, what I wrote. And having said that, I also wanted to show you just a quick drive-through of me downtown, December, a week after the riots, a week after people burned their own subways down. Everything's boarded up. There weren't as many burnt out buildings as we'd been told. Yeah, I kind of wanted to show you the trash on the street too, but it was, the banks were certainly trashed because this is seen as a battle between the haves and the have-not. It's a difficult time for Chile. What happens next, we don't know. The elections were supposed to happen in April, and they've been put off because of COVID until October. I'm not sure they'll even happen then because COVID is only now really sinking its teeth into the country there and much of South America. So much like here, there's a lot of unresolved issues. And all I can say is that I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. And I hope that some of this was instructive, and please continue to drink good wine. It's worth doing, right?